The preservation of and increased access to the 92nd Street Y Humanities Audio Archives is generously funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities.
Good evening. My name is John Rosenthal. Oh, I see a lot of familiar faces out there. I'm a trustee of the 92nd Street Y, and that's how come I'm out here tonight. Good evening and welcome to the Rosenthal Commemorative Lecture, endowed in the memory of my parents, Mina W. and Harold L. Rosenthal. I am delighted to introduce this year's guests. The format tonight will be an interview followed by your questions and a book selling and signing in our adjacent art gallery, which is over here. Our moderator, Paul Rudnick, is an esteemed playwright and screenwriter. His plays include Jeffrey, for which he won an Obie and an Outer Critics Circle Award, Mr. Charles, currently of Palm Beach, The Naked Eye, and I Hate Hamlet. And he is also, and his latest, The Most Fabulous Story Ever Told. He has also written the novels Social Disease and I'll Take It. His screenplays include Adam's Family Values, the screen adaptation of Jeffrey, and In and Out. Neil Simon needs no introduction. He is one of the most successful American playwrights of all time and indeed a national treasure. He has written over 30 plays, 25 screenplays, including such masterpieces as The Odd Couple, Plaza Suite, Brighton Beach Memoirs, Lost in Yonkers, for which he won the Pulitzer Prize, Barefoot in the Park, The Goodbye Girl, and The Sunshine Boys. He was also the recipient of 4 Tony Awards and a Kennedy Center Honor for Lifetime Achievement. Tonight we get a rare glimpse into his own memoir entitled The Play Goes On. In this book and on our stage tonight, he shares the sometimes heartbreaking intimacies as well as triumphant achievements of his life, both on and off stage. I can't resist reading one phrase from the book, The Play Goes On. It says, "But without a partner, what you miss most is sharing, giving, connection, kinship, and commonality." I can't explain it, but that moved me to tears. We are pleased that this evening's performance is being filmed by Jewish Television Network for future broadcast on public television. We thank you for your cooperation in helping us bring tonight's event to a broader audience. That's a paid commercial. Ladies and gentlemen, Neil Simon and Paul Rudnick.
Oh, well,
Thank you.
I can't tell you, this is such a treat and an honor for me to be here with you.
Thank you, Paul. And I love your work, too.
Thank you.
It says so right there, I said.
That's right.
I love your work, too.
Well, which leads into my first question.
I knew it would.
Which, first of all, do you think that writing comedy is the most difficult and underappreciated occupation in the entire history of the world?
No, not really.
Why not?
Underappreciated, perhaps, yes. I don't find it hard. I mean, I think drama would be a lot harder for me. I mean, complete drama, in which I wrote no comedy at all in it. I mean, I attempted one once, and I couldn't help it. It got funny someplace. But no, I love writing comedy, but lately, and I say lately, it could be the last 15 or 20 years that I think I write dramatic plays that happen to be funny because I think the premise of the play is dramatic. There has to be something at stake in the play. I guess the earlier plays like Barefoot in the Park and some of the others later on, Rumors, they're out-and-out comedies. But even when I wrote The Odd Couple, I thought it was a very serious play to begin with. Because in the beginning, Felix is about to commit suicide over his wife leaving him, and Oscar couldn't make ends meet. He couldn't support his kid. It was rather dark, I thought. And then it just got funnier and funnier, and I don't always know when the play is going to be funny and not be funny. I don't worry about that. It's a long answer. This answer will be the only question we will do tonight. I think I covered that.
Yeah, no, all right. No, because, well, it's funny, I find when I write too that you don't necessarily plan for a laugh, and sometimes there are laughs that occur unexpectedly, which are such nice bonus occasions.
Oh, that's always happened to me. I remember Mike Nichols and I standing in the back of a theater in Boston where we're trying out a play, and suddenly the audience erupts in a huge laugh at something, and he looks at me and I look at him, we go, what are they laughing at? And every night we go, and they're still laughing. We wanted to ask the audience what it was so we could take credit for it.
No, I think that those are the rewards for the laughs you count on that don't come.
That don't come, which are many.
Now, you began your career in television, and you were writing as part of just a spectacular group of talents on your show of shows with Mel Brooks, Larry Gelbart, people like that. But did you find was it frustrating to write as part of a group? Do you think, is there something just that's really tough about working by committee?
No, I mean, it was the safest thing in the world for me because I hadn't broken out on my own yet. I mean, I had only written first I wrote with my brother, writing special material for comics, and then we would get odd jobs here and there. Mm-hmm. And Max Lieben came up to this, the producer, came up to Tamament in the Poconos, was a resort where we would do an hour and a half musical review each week. So that's where I was always constantly writing with somebody, but to walk into the writers on that show, Larry Gelbart, Mel Brooks, Carl Reiner, went on and on. My brother, Joe Stein, who wrote Fiddler on the Roof, Michael, who wrote Hello Dolly, and Michael Stewart. Yeah. Almost everybody on that show went on to do greater things later on. But the best, I think, was the fun of writing on that show because everybody backed you up. I mean, you could come up with nothing that day and just still be safe.
Mm-hmm. Gee, I remember reading that you would sometimes whisper your punchlines to other writers, and they would say that this is what Neil has.
I couldn't yell louder than Mel Brooks. It was, I mean, if any of you have seen that thing, that PBS thing where all the writers of the show were on, thank you. If you'll notice, I said very little because I unfortunately sat next to Mel Brooks, who just got up and took over the show like Al Jolson. And so I found my spots to say something, but I was quite happy to just laugh at Mel Brooks. But on working on your show of shows, I did sit very often next to Carl, and I don't like to yell unless there's a reason to. And so Carl would always say, Neil's got it, and he'd say the line, and I would hear it, and I'd laugh because Carl said it funny, and I didn't know it was that funny.
But later, when you wrote about those years in Laughter on the 22nd floor, did you hear from all of your past colleagues?
Well, they all came. Almost all of them came. I didn't do the show until I told Sid Caesar, that I was going to write the play and that I had to leave in. I felt it was very important to write about the problems he was going through during that show of his problems with alcohol and taking antidepressants at the same time. And I only wrote about it because Sid had written it in his own biography a few years before. But I felt to be very true to that story rather than making it a bunch of jokes with the comedy writers sitting around. He said, do it the way you want it, I trust you. And so I thought it came out rather well. And we're going to do it this year as a television show on the Showtime network, I guess it is, in which I've rewritten a lot. I made it into a film, and so I've opened it up. and I hope it goes well.
Yeah, I would think that would so naturally lend itself to going back to the medium it was based on. In a way,
That's right.
at least.
It's
Yeah.
television on television. I never thought of that, Paul, right?
Now, you had 2 Broadway successes with Come Blow Your Horn and Little Me before you had your first all-out smash hit with Barefoot in the Park.
Right, yes.
Now, what was the difference? Was there a moment on Barefoot in the Park where you realized, I've arrived, this is it, this is a moment unlike any other?
Well, not while I was writing it, because as I was writing it, I said, who's going to pay attention to this? It's just 2 kids who were just married. It's not a big idea. And I gave up on the play in the middle of it, and then the people who were going to produce Little Me came to me, and I said, wow, and out. I don't have to do Barefoot in the Park now. And after doing Little Me, then I went back to it, and we had a first reading of it at the producer's house, St. Suber, and we had Mike Nichols was going to direct. We had Robert Redford, Elizabeth Ashley, Mildred Natwick, and Kurt Kasner, I think. And we had a reading of it, and nobody laughed in that room. And so when they laughed, I begged St. Suber to call off the play. I said, this is deadly. And Mike Nichols said, the actors are nervous. They're hearing it for the first time. They're hearing themselves. They don't know this is funny. So it didn't make me too confident to hear him say that. So then we went into rehearsal, and we sat down again. This is like months later, after I did a lot of rewrites, and we had the first reading of the play, and no one laughed again. And I said, Mike, this is getting to be a bad habit, you know. And then we finally did it we had a run-through at the Bucks County Playhouse, and these young people who were ushers during the day, and they were just sort of fixing the seats and getting the programs, and we were doing our final run-through, and they were looking at it and going, oh, God, I don't know what this is. And I was begging them again to call it off. It was a little too late. Then the curtain went up that night, and the audiences never stopped laughing, ever, ever. So it was incredible to me that I lost a little faith in myself because I said, I should know when it's going to work. Mm-hmm. But it took a long time to be pretty sure that you know that something's going to be good. I also know sometimes when something is going to be bad, and when it turns out to be bad, I'm not too disappointed because it means my instincts are intact.
Do you ever second guess yourself out of your instincts in a way of thinking that, wait, my first impulse was that this was surefire, and now I'm not so sure, and you can drive yourself other than that.
You do that. Well, you must know that too. We all do that. You know, every day that you go into your office or wherever you work, you have to have a lot of courage to go in there and to say, I'm going to be good today. But you know some days you're not. You're going to come up with junk. And that junk turns out to be the best thing in the play because a lot of people like junk. So very often what I do is if I tire on a play after a while and I just lose faith in it, I'll put it in the bottom drawer and it could sit there for a long, long time. And one play, what's the play? Brighton Beach Memoirs, sat in the drawer for 9 years. I had written 35 pages. I knew they were good, but I had no idea where the rest of the play was going. And I just gave up on it. And the few people who had read the play said, no, this is really good. You have to go on. I said, I can't. I don't know what it's about. And so when I took it out 9 years later, looking anywhere in the house, in my laundry for an idea someplace, I saw this play and I read it and I said, this is good. And I wrote it in 6 weeks after that. Because I really do believe that there's a part of your brain that has all kinds of functions. One knows how to drive a car. One knows what you should buy that you need in the refrigerator that day, and one writes plays. And so this play was being written in the back of my head for about 9 years, and I thanked it very much, and I gave it a nice gift for Christmas.
Now, you say you showed those 35 pages to other people. Do you have people you trust enough to show unfinished work?
Yes. At that time, it was two of my daughters, Ellen and Nancy. I trusted them implicitly. My wife then, I think it was Joan, of course. And the producer, well, it wasn't Manny Eisenberg yet. That was the producer, St. Suber, who had done Barefoot in the Park. Now, wait, we're in Brighton Beach now, so I'm in a time warp. Where are we now?
Just, I guess, with any of your work, are there always people who you trust, especially if you're wondering if it's going in the right direction? Are there people you can take it to where you also have that sense of privacy, where you could say, okay, give me an opinion on this?
Well, you know, you can never trust anybody too implicitly. There's no one in this business that I have more respect for than Mike Nichols. I mean, I think he's a genius. I worked with him 5 times. 4 of them were major hits. And I did one movie with him with Biloxi Blues, and it was, I thought, terrific. And so the night before we went into rehearsals with The Odd Couple, I had spent about 7 months writing the play, and then when Mike came into it, we spent another 3 or 4 months working on it together. Not with him writing, but always saying, I think you could fix this, you could fix that. And so the play was finally done, and we were ready to go into rehearsal. And it was the night before, and for some odd reason, we had a party the night before, afraid maybe that there wouldn't be an opening night party. And so I said to Mike, how do you feel about the play, Mike? And he said, I feel wonderful about it. Why? What do you feel? And I said, no, I think it's terrific. So he said, why are you asking me this question? And I said, well, we're professionals, and I think we're pretty good from our limited track record, and yet I know that we're going to go into rehearsal tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning, not rehearsal, but the reading of the first reading of it. Go in at 10 o'clock in the morning, and at 12:30 we'll be through with the reading. And I know that at 12:30 we're going to be in trouble somewhere in this play, and we don't know it now. And he said, well, we'll find that out tomorrow, and that's what happened. We went in, we read the first act. It was a 3-act play then, which it was great. The second act was incredible. The third act was terrible. And I said to Mike, what do we do? And he says, well, I'll direct the first 2 acts. You go home and write the third act. I said, you want to trade places? So you never really know. You don't know until you get in front of an audience. I mean, sometimes you have good instincts about it, and people laugh, and the backers or whatever it is, people are just so happy with it. But you just don't know until you get in front of an audience.
Well, I read in your first book, you mentioned that at one point Mike Nichols asked you about taking out the poker game in The Odd Couple.
Yeah, that was his lunatic moment. I said, he had been directing the play for about 2 weeks, and I was home rewriting almost every day, and I would just come in for a little while, which I don't usually do. I'm almost there all the time. But since I had so much rewriting to do, I didn't see it. And then he was watching it, and I was watching it, and I was really happy. And he says, can I speak to you alone? And we went to the back of the theater, and I said, what is it? And he said, you know, I'm kind of bored with the poker game. Can we take it out? I said, that will leave a 12-minute play. I mean, it's almost all about the poker game. When I first thought of the play, I tried to think of the structure of the play, and I took a long walk on the beach out in East Hampton, and I said, I've got it. The first act opens with a poker game. The second act opens with a poker game, only now it's influenced by Felix being such a pest to everybody. And the third act, it's all resolved, but it finishes with a poker game. And I couldn't imagine why he would want to take it out. And he said, well, I'm bored with it. And I said, stop watching it every day. So fortunately, we left it in.
Yeah, because that's, and I would think it would be so tough to also go against Mike Nichols and say, no, your instinct is wrong this time.
No, he was wrong a lot of times. But,
oh, good.
But he was wrong about little things, and he knew it right away. I mean, when he was right, he was so right. It was unbelievable. But we were doing Plaza Suite, and he said to me and to the set design, he says, I would like, it was in the suite at the Plaza Hotel, a beautiful suite, and he says, I want a crack in the ceiling. And I said, what's the crack for? He says, it's a metaphor about the decay of our civilization. I mean, this marriage is falling apart, and I think New York is falling apart, the rest of the world is falling apart. And I said, I think the audience is going to look up and say, there's a crack at the ceiling. And they're going to think that the people who painted the set forgot to do it, to fix it up. There was another time where this happened. We were watching The Odd Couple in rehearsal in New York, and he said, wouldn't there be a television set on the stage? And I said, why? He said, well, these guys, wouldn't they be watching like a ball game or a fight? I said, you don't play poker, Mike. I mean, I've never seen it. I play poker now and then, and it's very distracting, and the noise would be going on. He said, well, can I try it? And you can't say no to Mike, so we put a television set there, and he's with the back to the audience, and he says, no, 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 turn it around, because the audience will think we're cheating. So they turned it around, and the set was on. And I sat about 2 rows behind Mike. We were the only ones out in the auditorium. And the actors were doing the scene, and it's driving me crazy because I'm watching this television show. It is so distracting that you wouldn't hear one line of dialogue. You could hear it, but you wouldn't pay attention to it. And I said, Mike, please, let's not use it. And he just kept watching it, and we went on and on and on. And again, I begged him. I said, Mike, it's going to kill that whole scene. And he didn't answer me. And finally, I said, Mike, I beg you, take it out. And he said, oh, I'm sorry, what, were you talking to me? He was watching the television. So sometimes he's wrong, but those are the only 3 times I could think of.
Well, you've worked with so many just powerhouse directors, with Mike Nichols and Gene Saks and Bob Fosse. How did directors get the best out of you? What was your favorite way of working with a director?
Well, they all have their own way. I mean, Mike has his own way of contributing. He sort of sees things in the future, except he didn't quite see The Odd Couple about the trouble we'd get into. But one night, we were doing Prison of Second Avenue. We were coming home from the last dress rehearsal, and it was about 12 o'clock at night, and I'm feeling terrific. I think the play is great. And Mike said, the ending of the play is not going to work. And I said, really? Meaning the very last moment of the play. And I said, I think it is. Well, I said, well, we'll see tomorrow night. And he said, well, why wait till tomorrow night? Why don't we fix it now? I said, well, it's 12 o'clock. I'd like to go to bed. We've been working a long time. And so we walked back to the hotel we were staying at. And he said, well, sit here in the lobby with me and let's kick it around. And I hated him for this, because he always used to do things like that. He would call me at 3 o'clock in the morning and say, did I wake you? And I said, no, Mike, I'm always waiting for your phone call. So we were sitting in the lobby, and he started to pitch ideas. And I said, that's not good, that's not good. Then I would pitch some ideas, and he would say, no, no. And this went on for like an hour. And then we spent almost an hour of silence, complete silence. We're just sitting like this. Now I'm thinking of how I could get him killed and get a new director into the play. And then suddenly an idea came to me, and I said, what if it starts to snow, and he goes and gets the shovel out of the closet and sits there with his wife in a pose like the American Gothic painting. And Mike just got up and he says, I'll order the snow, I'll see you tomorrow. He didn't say, thanks, that's great, something like that. But he was absolutely right. So he's the kind who pushes you. He'll always say, think about this, think about that. You don't have to do it now, but think about it. Gene didn't work that way with me. Gene, but I thought was maybe the most brilliant with actors. Oh. He got more out of actors than anyone I knew, and eventually out of the play. I mean, I wouldn't put him above Mike. I mean, they're very close in their talents. But Gene worked a different way. He would say, I don't know about this scene, how do you feel about it? And I'd say, he didn't work on the structure of the rewrites of it with me as much. With Bob Fosse, it's not a play. I mean, it's a musical, and it's his musical, and I felt I'm working for him. Whatever you want, Bob, I'm going to do. So we worked on Little Me and Sweet Charity, because he called me in to help fix that up, and I was just going to do a little rewriting on it, but it turned out that I just took over on the whole book. But I took that just to watch the rehearsals of him and Gwen Verdon. Oh, my God. It was such a great pleasure to watch them.
Yeah, it's funny. I love musicals, but I've always somehow imagined that book writing is a very specific level of hell, that you always have to surrender all the peak emotional moments to the composer.
Right, yeah.
And so is that frustrating, or?
It's always frustrating, especially if there's, you see, I mean, I'm happy when I can control things, my own things, so that if I'm doing a play and there's a scene not working, or even in the musical and there's a scene not working, I can go home and rewrite it. But when I hear a song that's not working, I can't go home and rewrite the song. Even if they let me, I couldn't do it. But it would bother me when it didn't work, and it was very frustrating. But as you say, in a musical, especially in an emotional moment, you write up to the emotional moment, and then they write the song. So it's not a matter of ego, like, no, I want the credit for that. You just want to have the joy of being able to go through with the whole thing. Mm-hmm. But if they deliver a great song, you're as happy as can be.
That's true, and I guess also gives you more people to blame.
Oh, yes, yes.
What happens to me far too often is, do you ever, when you're working on some impossible moment, something you really need to solve, and you get the answer, and you're so happy and so relieved, and then it's not, and then it doesn't work, and you realize you thought you had reached the perfect end of the
I know.
road. And is that common?
Yeah, it's another Mike Nichols story. We were doing The Odd Couple, and we were having trouble again with that third act, even as far as Boston, because we had already played in Wilmington, and I think maybe we went to Washington, D.C., and then we went to Boston. And Elliot Norton, the critic there, we went on his show to talk about the play, and he said the lead line on his television show, or rather in his review, said, "Oh, for a third act." And I was saying, why couldn't you write, "Wow, 2 great acts"? Why he had to pick on our weakness, I don't know, but he really liked it, and he was trying to help us. And so he said to us, "You know what I think you guys ought to do?" He says, "You ought to bring those Pigeon Sisters back, because they were so good in that first act. We ought to have them in the third act." I wanted to get out of that studio so quick and get to a typewriter, because I knew he was right. So I went home and I wrote it. And I was laughing as I wrote it. And I gave it to Mike Nichols, and he got hysterical, and he said, "I don't think we can do this." And I said, "Why?" He says, "It's so funny, it will kill a number of people in the audience, and we'll be up for mass murder." And I said, "It's not that funny." He says, "No, I think it is." And then we rehearsed it, and the actors couldn't get through the scene. They laughed so hard. And I said, "I've never had an experience like this. It's like heaven. It's the funniest thing ever written, ever done." And so we got out there that night, and we did it, and we didn't get one laugh, not one. And I suddenly saw the back door, like back there, open hard, and there goes Mike outside and go running after him. I said, "What happened?" And he said, "The audience doesn't like what's happening to the characters." And it didn't occur to me. I mean, the story went in another direction, and an audience, which always amazes me, because it's not just a few people in the audience or a lot, it's all. All the audience decides we're not going to laugh at this. And so I had to go home and rework it, in which I thought I found a device in which was more acceptable to the audience and make the play sounder in its structure. But I didn't have time to really write good dialogue for it, so we just threw it up there, and we did it like 2 nights later, and they laughed at everything, because they were enjoying what was happening on stage to the characters. So that was a great lesson for me that I used, for the rest of my life. And that when you see something that's not working, investigate why the audience doesn't like that you did like when you were writing it.
Mm-hmm. Now, when another one of your earlier plays, in The Gingerbread Lady, was one of your first times when you went for something darker, a bit away from romantic comedy.
Right.
Which was that scary? Was that to say, okay, I'm not going to rely on laughter, and that I may also possibly alienate the audience's expectations?
Yeah, I knew it, but I knew it was time for me to move on. I knew I could keep on writing comedies. I thought I could write good ones. But I think after a while, the audience would get bored with it, maybe. I know I would get bored with it. I know I've gone back to it during my career and written out comedies, but I wanted to write something that had more depth to it. I wanted these three people to be in major trouble, but they were very, very close friends, and they all depended on each other. But the 3 of them were losers in a way. And so I did the play. I felt very good about what we had done, but I never thought it was going to be a huge hit. I thought maybe that the critics would like it, that I had made a step forward. But no, they said, no, we want the funny stuff again. The audiences, we almost closed the play. I mean, St. Subert, the producer of the play, put up the Saturday night closing notice in Boston. And Maureen Stapleton, who was starring in the play, grabbed me, and she said, "If you let him close this play, I will come up to your bedroom tonight and put a fork in your throat." So I did not want a fork in my throat that night. So I knew I wasn't going to let him close it either, because I said, that's such a cowardly way out. At least give us the chance to play out in Boston. So I got on a train rather than go back home on the plane, back to New York, because I wanted the time to work on it, and I wanted to go home to write it. I didn't want to be in a hotel, because I had so much rewriting to do. And I would send the rewrites up every night, every single night. And it made the play better and better, but I knew it still wouldn't be a hit. Mm-hmm. But we came to New York, and we had a year's run, and Maureen won the Tony Award for it. We made it into a film called Only When I Laugh, and Marsha Mason got an Academy nomination for playing the same role. Mm-hmm. And the play lives on. So I think the best thing to do is always just keep on working until it's gone.
Could you, do you ever get angry at the audience? Have you ever been in the situation where you feel you still love that scene or that line or that moment and the audience seems to be fighting you?
Well, I can't get angry at them because, I mean, they're really right in the end, but it's sometimes you get paranoid and you pick on the wrong person. I remember I went, soon after Barefoot in the Park opened, every night the audiences just loved the play, and they were laughing and laughing, and my wife, Joan, was coming to meet me at the play that night, and so she was going to come about 45 minutes late, and I was watching the audience from the back of the house, and everybody's heads were going back and forth, but there was one man on the aisle, and he was going, oh. And he'd look at his watch, oh God, like this. And he was all I could look at. I didn't hear the rest of the laughter. And Joan said, how is it going? And I said, terrible. Yes, terrible. So, yeah, you can hate people in the audience. I mean, you don't like coughers, none of us do. But I found a trick, though, I'll tell this to you and to the audience. You can always stop an audience almost from coughing. If the character says, okay, I'm going to tell you the most important thing you've ever heard in your life, nobody will say a word. You know, some guy with pneumonia would do this. He wants to hear it.
That's very handy. God.
Now forget you heard that. You all forget it.
But now when you're working on the early plays or on pure comedy, on a farce like Rumors, I find I will sometimes stand in the back of the house and make deals with God. That, you know, if God will let the audience laugh at the next line, he can have my right arm. And then after they laugh, I immediately take it back, but make a new deal for the next line. Do you ever get that obsessive?
Well, you only make a deal with God if he has money in the show. Then he looks to protect it.
Right.
Yeah. No, I've never done that. I've never prayed for a hit, because I think that's kind of cheating. I mean, the prayers that I have are for much more important things than a hit. I don't mean to be self-serving in that either. But it really seems, maybe in the beginning of your career you want to do that because this means more to you than anything else in life, that you want to be a playwright and you want to be there for a long time. But that's something, some supernatural way of making the play work. I want to know why it doesn't work and figure it out. And if it doesn't work, I'll learn from it.
That's true, although I remember there was a story in your first book about during Odd Couple, when you were having the third act problems, that you stepped into St. Patrick's Cathedral.
This was when I had to go home that day to rewrite the third act, and I was walking back home. I lived on the east side and walking from the west side, and I walked past, it started to rain, so I just ducked into St. Patrick's Cathedral. And I said a few words in there, and I said, you may not be listening to me because I'm Jewish, but I don't know if I said if there's anything you can do. I said, because I don't know if you go to the theater anyway. But sometimes, you know, somebody hears something, because something comes into your head, you get an idea, and often you wonder where it came from.
Well, I find that a lot of people always ask, I think all writers, where do you get your ideas from, as if there were a machine you could put the quarter into, that if it were only that easy, you know?
Well, I mean, for the first 10 plays, every time I had to start a new play, I wanted to call one of my playwright friends and say, I forget how you do it. How do you start a play? Where do you get the ideas from? And they would hang up on me knowing that I'm crazy. You do reach that point, even now. I mean, I could just stare up at a wall thinking, how do you get the idea for a new play? A good thing that I do is just think of rotten ideas. So you eliminate all those, so you don't have to go back to that place anymore. And the thing that I think I learned once from Max Gordon, who produced Born Yesterday and a lot of other wonderful plays, I met with him when I did Come Blow Your Horn, and he read it, and he asked me to come to his office, and he said, one day, kid, you're going to write a great play. This isn't it. This one. So I said, well, what's wrong with it? And he said, the characters. You don't have strong characters. He says, so what you've got is a house that's built on sand, and it's going to sink into the sand. Well, that was a very ugly picture. I didn't want to see that. So I listened to him, and then I realized you do think of characters first, and when you do, and you get very rich characters, they automatically lend themselves to an idea for a story. I mean, I always say, I could write a play about that person or those people. I never think if I could write a play about that situation. I mean, Rumors, I started off Rumors, as you probably know, a farce is probably the hardest thing in the world to write, because the demands of it is that you've got to keep the plot going constantly. It has to keep getting in more and more trouble, and it has to get funnier and funnier, and it has to move faster and faster. And, wait, I lost my place. Why was I telling you this?
I guess about where ideas come from.
Yeah, I still lost my place. I don't know where I was going with that. About
The way... characters. How you have to have...
No, that doesn't fit this one.
Well, with farce, you have to keep everything...
After this is over, you all stay, and then it'll come up with it. I'm sorry, Paul.
All right.
It'll come up because I know why I wanted to talk about Rumors. Oh, I know what it was. It was not knowing where... It took, I mean, not only guts, it's almost insane, of writing a play where you have no idea where it's going from page one. I just started with a woman pacing back and forth, and kept looking for the phone. And then a man coming out from upstairs and said, "Did you get the doctor yet?" She said, "Leave me alone, I'm thinking. It just went on, and I just kept adding trouble after trouble, and a whole play came. And then I got to the very end of the play, in which there's 10 characters or 12 characters in the play, and the main character has to come down, who has never been seen in the play up till then, I think, and explain to the audience, to the people there in the play, what had happened on this particular night. Now, I had no idea, and I said, I've spent a year writing this, and I have all these people and the audience waiting to hear how this play ends, and I'm saying, okay, God, this is the one I'm going to ask for. And I didn't know how to do it, and so I said, write one word at a time. And I wrote, it was actually like 3 words or 4 words. He said, I came home. I said, I'm safe so far. My wife was upstairs, and this is good. I went up to see how she was doing. I had champagne, and then I went on step by step by step, and he tells the entire story, which is a lie. He knows it's all a lie. He's going to make it up to tell the police. And so when the police come in, he tells the entire story to the policeman. And he buys it, and he leaves, and he says, there's no trouble going on here. And the story turns out to be true. He didn't know. He made it up. That's a farce. I mean, it's crazy. You can't rationalize them all the time, but the audience laughed much more than you are now.
See, you are allowed to hate them. No,
no, that's not hate. I dislike you a little bit.
Testing them. You've worked with so many great stars. Is it difficult or very gratifying to write a role for a specific performer, to really tailor something?
Yeah, but you don't. You don't do that until you've cast them. Once you've cast them, then you say, okay, I've got George C. Scott, I've got Maureen, I could write them. But I would never think of an actor beforehand, because chances are you won't get them.
Right.
But I've been very fortunate, because the one thing I don't, even in the best of the comedies, like The Odd Couple or Barefoot, you don't look for comic actors, you look for terrific actors who can also do comedy. Like Brando, who's a great actor I wouldn't trust with a comedy, really. But when you get the good actors, what happens is the audiences then believe the story. They go along with the story, and all the laughter is like icing on the cake. But when you get comics, they have a way of sort of tipping off to the audience that they're being funny. They can't help but resist that. So they don't resist it. So yes, look for the best actors all the time.
I remember you had one wonderful story about Sid Caesar in Little Me changing a word.
Well, it was a big word. I hope I can remember this. It was one of the funniest lines in the play. The girl that he didn't marry, that he wanted to because his parents wouldn't let him, and the girl came from the wrong side of the track and she couldn't. But she married somebody very wealthy, and apparently they still love each other, and they meet on the deck of a ship, and they meet each other, and they act very cool about it, and like, how are you doing? Fine, et cetera, et cetera. And suddenly they throw themselves into each other's arms, and she says, oh, Noble, isn't there some way we can go on seeing each other? And he says, what do you want to do? Lie to our family and friends, check into cheap hotels, another thing like that. I can't think of it. She says, no, of course not. He says, well, it was just a suggestion. So it got a huge laugh every night. So one night, Sid got to that line. He says, you want to go check into cheap hotels, lying to our families and friends, hiding in cheap places or something? She says, no, of course not. He says, well, it was just a situation. Now, there was no laugh. So I went backstage, and I didn't want to say anything to Sid because he's the strongest man I've ever seen. He once pulled out a sink out of a hotel room and just pulled it out. So and he wasn't even too angry that night. So I didn't know how to say it to Sid. And he said, why did that line get the big laugh tonight? And I said, well, you said it's just a situation. He said, so what's the difference? I said, you know, Sid, I'm late. I gotta go.
Now, usually when a play's in rehearsal, a lot of directors and actors prefer that if a playwright has suggestions or troubles, that they always go through the director, that you don't speak to actors directly. How do you prefer to work?
Well, I try to do that because you don't want to take anything away from the director. I mean, you want to go through him, and he'll say, yes, but later. Let me work on this scene. But if I'm sitting, in the corner someplace and an actor asks me something about the characterization and are they doing it right or something, then I'll give them my advice. But I would always defer to the director. And then we could always talk later on, the two of us, and I'd give him my suggestions.
Now, you've written very autobiographical plays. Do the actors ever ask you to fill them in on the real-life figures that it's based
Very
on?
often, yeah. I mean, I always call them sort of semi-autobiographical because I took the basis of sort of what happened and embellished on it and made it into fiction to fit the needs of a play. But I still knew the motivations of the characters, why they were doing that. And so I could just say right in the middle of the rehearsal, I mean, to the director and everyone else, I said, well, the way that thing sort of happened in my life was such and such, and they would get to understand it.
Now, you've written both original screenplays and you've adapted your own plays into films. Which do you prefer?
It's more fun to write an original because it's hard to live up to what you did for the stage because the rhythm of the writing on stage is quite different. There's a patter to it. The dialogue just goes and flows, and no one is interrupting it except when the audiences are laughing, and that they just meld into the performance itself. But when you write, let's say, a very good comic screenplay, then you hand it over to the director and the editor who's going to cut it up and chop it. They don't even have to take any lines out. They just can cut to somebody else, and it takes the eye off where you really want to be. Like if you're watching a stage, that they can see the both of us now and see how we are interacting with each other. But in the film, they could just be on me when you're saying something that's important. And that's hard for me to deal with. But in doing an original screenplay, I don't know where the laughs are or where the big moments are, so I would have to trust the director implicitly with that.
And the editor. I'm always so impressed with people who can edit, especially for laughter, because I think it's so tricky to, especially if you're adapting a play that you know is funny, to make it not feel stage-bound.
I know, yes.
And to include the audience's response without seeming to leave holes for it.
Yeah, I've gone through that. The worst experience I had was the very first movie I ever wrote was After the Fox with Peter Sellers, and it was shot all in Italy, and I was delighted to do it because we had a great director, Vittorio De Sica, but the Italian director, but he didn't speak English all that fluently, and he had two women editors who spoke no English at all. So I wondered how they would cut it, because they couldn't listen to the end of the line, so they would just do it by the pictures. They would go, here's a good place. There's another good place here, we'll just cut it. So it was a jumble.
Good Lord. Now, you've also sometimes used original cast members from a stage production in the film and sometimes not. Which do you prefer? Is there any sort of guideline for that?
Well, for one thing, I have to get past the studio first. I mean, they want a name in a certain situation where at the time when we did Chapter 2 and turned it into a film, I asked Marsha Mason if she would do it because it was basically a story about the two of us, and she didn't want to do the play because She felt it was much too close. But when it came to the film, she said, there's enough distance in it for me to attack it as a role and not something that I played. But in the play, we had Judd Hirsch, who I thought was wonderful in the play. But I couldn't get the studio to buy him because he wasn't a big enough name, so they got James Caan, who I didn't think was really quite as good as Judd was. Mm-hmm. So you lose some of those battles.
Right. Is that frustrating to know that for some people the record of a play is a movie that you're not entirely happy with? But do you feel, okay, the play will always be there?
You mean, am I happy or unhappy about the studio's reaction? You mean?
No, just the idea that if a movie, the lack of control that you have over a movie, and that people all over the world will be seeing that, as opposed to maybe the somewhat smaller audience that sees a play on stage.
Yeah, I do feel out of control there, and that I wish I had more control. On the other hand, I've had directors make the pieces even better. I thought Herbert Ross did an incredible job with the Sunshine Boys, and a great job with The Goodbye Girl. I thought it was impeccably directed, and the Goodbye Girl was a brand new piece that I had written specifically for Marcia and for the films. And so I just trusted him, and he was wonderful.
Have you ever been tempted to direct?
No, because I have better hours. I mean, at 4 o'clock I'm through. I don't want to hang around the set anymore, because what they're doing basically most of the times is just going over the angles. In other words, they've shot me, now they want to go over there and shoot your point of view. But I don't know enough about film. Even I've done 28 films and I still don't know enough about it. I don't even know that much mechanics about the theater. I mean, I never know how the curtain goes up. I go, look at that, it's going up just at the right time. They're all in their seats. How does the curtain know when to go up? I don't bother with the mechanics. I mean, you and I were talking backstage, and we were both saying, which is stage right and stage left? And which is upstage and downstage? And I always pretended I knew. I would say, well, over there is a good spot. It's good.
Or just in the light is always
in the light,
good.
yes.
Now, you mentioned that you sometimes, because of rewriting, are unable to be at rehearsals. But do you, as a rule, like to be there the whole time?
On a play?
Yeah.
Well, I am there, let's say, for the first 10 or 11 days, and I'm not watching the play, I'm listening to the play, because these are the days that are most important for me to do the rewrites. Mm-hmm. I remember when we were doing Laughter on the 23rd Floor, and Jerry Zaks, who's a wonderful director, he had never worked with me before, so he said, we had the reading, and he said, Neil, it's going to be wonderful, so why don't you go away for 10 days and come back and let's see what we've done. And I said, no, Jerry, you don't understand. It's in those 10 days I would take out all the stuff that I think doesn't work and try to replace it with better stuff. So he agreed, and I did. I worked every day and changed things. They said, now I can go away and you can work with the actors. And I did. I went back to California, and he called me the next day. He says, come back, because I like it. I like it when you're there.
How about on movies? Do you like being on the set, or is that just...
I did for a long time, and then I got bored with it. I mean, there's nothing more boring than being on a set. But Ray Stark, the producer, I've done 10 films with him, was a very smart and practical man. And I walked on the set of, I think maybe it was The Sunshine Boys, was the first movie we did together. And I walk on the lot in California, and I'm seeing all the big trailers of Walter Matthau and George Burns and others, and I see a trailer with my name on it, and I know writers don't get a trailer. And so I look at it from the outside, and I see Ray, and I said, is that trailer for me? And he said, yes. And I said, why? And he said, well, go in and look. So I went inside, and I looked, and on the table was a typewriter and papers up to here. He said, write the next movie. And I did. So, I mean, he put it to good use, so I wasn't getting any benefits from it except to write the next thing.
Now, how long does it take you to achieve a kind of real perspective on something you've written, a play or a film? Did you know right away, okay, this is one of my favorites, or this is solid, or this is a real step forward, or do you sometimes revise your opinion 5 years later, 10 years later?
I do revise my opinions, because if you get sort of bad notices from the critics, and I think they're wrong, I'll stay that way for a long time, and then see what history has to say about the play. Do audiences want to see it? Does the play do well in Europe or around the country in regional theaters? And if it doesn't, I begin to look at the play again and read it, and I said, no, maybe it doesn't have the qualities I thought it had. But it's hard to judge it later on. Very often you go by what your opinion of the play is, by how good a time you had when you were doing the play. Was the company fun to be with? Were rehearsals fun? Were the actors terrific? Was everybody selfless and all trying to make the play great? Or did you have problems with it? And the play that you had problems with and the actors were kind of playing around sometimes could turn out to be one of the better plays you have, so you can't judge by that.
Which is, I find, you always hope that there's a nice rule that if everyone is such a good person and you've become so close to all of them that will result in a good, something wonderful on stage, and it's very annoying when it doesn't.
It doesn't always happen. I remember we were in rehearsal in California with Brighton Beach Memoirs, and we had an actress playing a very important role, and we were rehearsing for about a week, and I knew every actor and actress in the play was doing great work. This actress was a good actress, but she was a little self-involved, I thought, because as the scene in the rehearsal would start to move and get going, and you could see the other actors starting to move with it, she would suddenly say, Gene, do you think it's better if I stood over here or over there? Well, after about the 10th time she did it, I would look at the actors and they would go, oh God, she's doing it again. And finally one night I was walking to my car after rehearsal, and the actors en masse were all there except this one actress. And they said, Neil, we're all actors and we would protect actors with our lives, but I think this person is going to ruin this play because she never lets us get going. She doesn't let herself get going. And I knew it, and we were coming very close to opening and doing our first preview. And Gene and I talked it over, and we let her go. We had to fire the actress and brought in somebody. We brought in Joyce Van Patten, who learned it in a week and was perfect because she fit right into the mold of those actors. And what happened, Elizabeth Franz played the mother in that play, and she insisted, the set of that play, Brighton Beach Memoirs, was the home, and there was a kitchen there, and there was a little room in the back, and she insisted that when all the actors came in and got into their makeup and things, to meet her on the stage before the curtain went up and just talk about the day's events. So because she said, when I see you in the play for the first time, I don't want it to feel like it's the first time I'm seeing you, because I've been seeing you all day in the house. So we've got to be a family before the curtain goes up. And it's wonderful when actors and actresses do things like that, and those are the treasures that you don't know that you're going to get from a company of actors.
Oh, that's the best. Now, a lot of writers, novelists, and playwrights often harvest their earliest childhood and their families for their first novel or their first play. And even though your early works were somewhat, as you say, partly autobiographical, I think people think of Brighton Beach and Biloxi Blues as being the early years. Why was that your route? Why do you feel that you took that amount of time to get to that material?
I'm not quite sure. What I'm about to say I don't think is right, but at one point, after I wrote Barefoot in the Park, then The Odd Couple, but The Odd Couple wouldn't be the next in line, I felt I was starting my life with my marriage to Joan. And so I thought, the way, I think it was Eugene O'Neill who wrote a series of 10 plays that followed sequentially. And that's what I wanted to do. I didn't quite do it that way, but I knew when I got to Brighton Beach, I wanted to continue that series. And so after Brighton Beach opened, and it was a huge hit, Frank Rich of the New York Times wrote, it was not a wonderful review, but at the end he says, one hopes there'll be a chapter 2 to Brighton Beach. I later heard from somebody at the Times that his suggestion was that I write about my days on the Sid Caesar show, but that would not have followed. I mean, that would have come prior to my even meeting Joan. So I decided to follow the sequence again and write Biloxi Blues, which is, I went into the Army after that. I was that young boy in Brighton Beach, and then Broadway Bound was the end of the trilogy. I didn't want to write just 2 plays. Also, I never sat down to write a trilogy, because as I said in the book, if the first play is a flop, who wants to go see a sequel to a flop?
Well, and even though, as you say, I think any artist who writes characters that are based somewhat on reality still changes them and creates whole new creatures. But since there will be a sense among your friends, your family, that they will assume that certain characters are based on real life people, does that concern you? Do you worry about people's feelings about exposing people, even if they're very affectionately written?
Well, I'll tell you the quintessential story about that. If you haven't heard it, it's in one of the books. When I wrote the first play, Come Blow Your Horn, the one I was most afraid to see the play was my father. He and my mother had split up. My mother had come to the opening night, and I remember seeing her after the play, and I said, "What'd you think, Mom?" And she says, "I don't know, I'll have to come again and see it sometime." I said, "You didn't see it tonight?" She says, "No, I was too busy watching the celebrities and watching the critics if they were laughing." But my father was going to come about 4 nights later, and I really was petrified because I think I put him up there on the stage, but in sort of a caricatured way, and he may not have liked that. And so I stood really nervously out in the street waiting for him to come out, and he came out, and I went over to him. I said, "What'd you think, Dad?" And I was really talking about the father in the play, and he said, "I know so many men just like him." So, you know, well, people sometimes do not recognize themselves in the play, and some people recognize themselves and they're not even in the play. He said, "That's me, isn't it?" So make him feel good. He said, "Yeah, that's you."
All right, well, I've just gotten the signal that, that they'd like to open up the evening for questions from people in the audience. So I guess there are microphones that have been set up in the aisles. So if anyone has any questions. Sure.
Keep veto power over the actors and actresses.
Pardon me, I can't hear.
Keep veto power
Veto power?
over the actors and actresses with plays.
In a play? You mean in casting?
Casting, yeah.
Oh, yeah, you do that completely with the director and the producer. I mean, the three of us get together, and we try to make it unanimous. If sometimes it's not unanimous, the one who'll back off would be the producer. He'll say, "You guys are really doing the play, so you pick the actor or actress you want." But if I didn't want somebody, they're not going to hire the person. That's not so in a movie, though, as I said before. Yeah.
Mr. Simon, one play of yours that I really liked a lot was the musical version of The Goodbye Girl, and I thought that Bernadette Peters gave such a magnificent performance. Do you have any opinion as to why the critics weren't more appreciative of her performance and of your play in general?
Well, I didn't think they singled her out, but I was not happy with the show. None of us were happy with the show. I never thought it would make a good musical. It was too small. It was basically 3 characters, as the movie was, Richard Dreyfuss and Marsha Mason and the young girl. And I said, I don't know how you open this up into a musical unless you make it a very small musical. But the composer and lyricist thought that they could make it a bigger show. I didn't know how you would make a set that could house all of the rooms in that house and how you'd go from one room to the other. It just had all its problems. And so even though I'm glad that you liked it, I wasn't that fond of it. I thought Bernadette was good. She's always good. But I thought Marty Short was the mainstay of that play. He kept it going for as long as he did. But that was a disappointment. Not a disappointment. It's one of those things where I said before, my instincts told me it wouldn't work. It didn't work, and I wasn't too unhappy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes.
I just wondered when you first finished the play. When you first finish a play, do you gather a group of actor friends, like either in a room somewhere in your living room, just to hear it for you?
No.
Or like, no, you
No.
just, and do you get other people to listen? You just put it out there?
I don't want to hear it.
You don't want to hear it?
Well, I do it myself. I act it out myself. I mean, when I'm, almost literally, when I'm writing it, I sort of mumble the words because I want to hear if it's a mouthful for the actors. But I'm not ready to hear the play yet, especially after I've just written it. I'll put it away and go on and do other things, then come back to it, a few weeks later, and then send it off to the people who are going to give me their opinions. But while I'm waiting for them, I'm already on the second draft. Every time I look at it, there's another draft coming out.
Mr. Simon, let me confirm something. I think I've heard you say previously. Somebody asked you at a previous speaking engagement what you thought were the best translated versions of your plays on film, and you said The Odd Couple, The Sunshine Boys, and The Biloxi Blues. Is that true?
I think so, unless you remind me of others. Yeah. I mean, I was very happy with those. Extremely.
What?
I was very happy with those, yes.
I wanted to thank you for all the many, many hours of joy and pathos and tears that you've brought to us.
Thank you.
And I know some people worship their own God. In our house, the God we worship is Neil Simon.
Oh, thank you.
And we have a very special place in our heart for the Goodbye Girls. So I just wanted to say that.
You mean the movie?
No, the play. I have a
The
long
musical.
story about that.
The musical.
But,
Then I was wrong over here. It was great.
we love that play. We
Thanks.
went to Philadelphia to see it.
Oh.
At any rate, and also I wanted to tell you how much I love Proposals. I
thank
know
you.
of really no other American play that moved me as much as that did, and I'm eternally sorry that the critics didn't feel that way as well.
Well, there was more of a problem than the critics. I think, Broadway was starting to change a lot then. I mean, it's been changing for the last 10 years. But I would see people walk by that, I would see people at that show who loved the play and had the same feelings you did. But more and more the people who came to the theater were coming from out of town, even out of the country. And they would walk by the plays and go to the nearest musical. And so I felt that had that play been done maybe 10 years ago or even 7 years ago, it might have received what I thought should have been a better reception. So I was upset about that. But you can't stay too upset too long because you've got to get on to the next thing. But I hope that'll be rejuvenated and worked again because there are those regional theaters all over the country that may do it. Thanks.
Well, my question, and I've had this since I saw the movie California Suite, and this morning we have all of your plays at home, and I looked it up to get it right. But there's a scene in there between Hannah and Billy where Hannah is talking about her new lover and says, he also has the second best mind I've met in this country since Adlai Stevenson. And I was wondering if the first best mind was Billy.
Was Billy?
Yeah. Was that
I never thought
sort
of
of her
that.
way of saying that she still had feelings for him?
No, I
No.
just thought it would be too pretentious to say he has the best mind since.
Thank
so
you.
I was on safer ground by saying the second best and let the audience think about who the first was.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for being here. I'm a playwright, and I'm wondering if you were starting as a playwright these days, how you think you would deal with the very different theatrical environment, and if you could just say a few words about what your thoughts are on how much it has changed.
Well, it's always hard to put yourself in the place of if I was starting today and what would I be doing in today's world, even though I am still in today's world and still writing plays, because I'm going to do one soon. In about a couple of weeks we start. And I think it fits today's world a little more than in structure maybe than the other plays. But the only advice I would give you is the same advice I gave myself. Go to see as many plays as you can and just keep writing constantly. I mean, too many people say, well, I finished my play. It's the first play I've written. Do you know the name of a good agent? I mean, you're not ready for a good agent because the worst thing that could happen is that your play would go on and would be a success and you wouldn't know how to write the second play. So you have to get all of that experience and also be buffeted a lot up and down so that you can stand the rigors of what it's like to be a playwright. And if you say, I'm still determined to go ahead and do this, then you've got a step in the right direction.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
What's your next play?
Are you a critic? No. Yes, it is. It's called The Dinner Party, and it's 6 people in a Paris restaurant. Well, actually a private dining room in a Paris restaurant. And I can't go into the details too much. I know it'll all be exposed like the night after we show it to the public, but there are too many secrets about the play that I want to wait and see how that first night audience accepts it. Are they going to be surprised or not? But it has to do a lot with divorced people. I was going to call the play Divorce at first, But that's not what the play was about. It's literally about this dinner party and why these people come. And the people are French also. And the reason I made it French, I didn't want it to make it an American play and make it sound like the other plays that I've written, because I would probably have set it in New York. I wouldn't have set it in Los Angeles. And I wasn't happy in setting it in New York because I wanted it to be more of a universal play. I think it's something that could happen to 6 people anywhere. And so I wrote my English as if it were French. In other words, the sentences are structured in a different way. It's like a different kind of music. I found out a long time ago when I would send a play of mine that was, let's say, 110 pages to Paris, and they would do it there and they would translate it. They would send me back the translation. It would be 140 pages. So I knew to write this dialogue just a little longer. I mean, it's not a long play. It's done in 1 act, but it's about 97 minutes. And if you were to add the intermission that you would normally see, it would be like a full-length play. But I'm looking forward to this with great excitement. Do you all have a question? You all want to say it at the same time.
I've just gone into acting, changed in midlife career change, and I find that it's harder to do scenes that are supposedly comedic because you have to show the pain underneath. I don't know, I'm having a little trouble with that. It's easier to cry and carry on than it is to be funny.
A question, if it was a question, but this young lady finds it harder to try a role that has comedy in it because you don't know how to approach it.
Right, is there the tragic character? Well,
No, don't think of the tragic, just think of the reality of it. Don't think that she's saying anything funny because that character doesn't know she's saying something funny unless it's like a witty play when that character's a witty person. But if she says the truth, but the audience hears the irony of it, then they'll get the humor of it. So play real all the time.
Mr. Simon, I remember I had seen one of the early regional productions of Boston Yonkers when I was away in college. And when I saw the film version, I remembered it exactly the same as the play, except for the last scene where they changed one. I won't say because some people may not have seen it, but I just wondered if you personally got bothered by that the last scene was changed.
Well, I didn't get bothered by it because I wrote it that way. It's probably how I would have ended the play if I could have done it on stage. But I wanted Bella to break away from the family. And she was scared stiff, but she had a little bag, and she was just walking down that street. And you don't know what's happening to her. And later on, at the very end of the play, I think there's another postcard that's read from Bella. And she says that she's down in Florida, and she's working, and she's living in a nice place with a very nice girl. And she's trying to live her own life. I didn't want her trapped in that house with a grandmother forever. But I couldn't do it the other way. I couldn't have her leave that door and say, "Goodbye, Mama." There's something not theatrical enough for me. You're welcome. This gentleman here.
Who are some of the playwrights, in addition to Mr. Rudnick, that you admire?
Well, I do, in fact, admire Mr. Rudnick a lot. I like his plays. I like his movies. He's first rate. Well, you're not just talking about contemporary play. Oh, well, then I can go back to, I was going to say Metamorphosis. He wasn't the playwright, was he? No, I love Chekhov. I love, I mean, to say Shakespeare is ridiculous because he invented the whole language. I like the plays of Arthur Miller and David Mamet and so many other playwrights, Peter Schaffer. I don't really go to see a playwright's work. I go to see a play that I hear is really good and I want to see it. I don't have the time to go to see everybody's play. I wish I could, but I don't want my life to be in the theater all the time because I spend enough of it in my work. So I don't go to movies much these days anymore because I can't see the world being blown up anymore. So, but just plays. I mean, playwrights. I wish there were more playwrights who wrote more consistently. You know, Paul does, and there were a number of people, but they've stopped in the last few years. A lot of really good playwrights, because they've run into the same problems of the audiences are going to go to see a musical anyway. And unfortunately, they're going to see revivals. They're not even going to see new musicals. So we're going backwards a little bit, I think. Well,
Mr. Simon, you've talked a little bit, especially in terms of film, about turning your work over to a director and what the director can do. But you've had your plays turned into TV series, and this year somebody rewrote The Out-of-Towners. How do you feel about taking your characters and turning them over to another writer?
well, I don't always have a choice in the matter. I couldn't stop The Out-of-Towners. They asked me to write it, and I said, I wrote it already. I did it once. I thought it came out pretty good. I liked it. And I said, I don't think it's going to work, because it was a very innocent piece about a much more innocent time. Because I knew, when I started to think of it, that maybe I should write it, I knew that the minute they checked into the airport, the man is going to say, did you pack your luggage? Did anyone else help you pack your luggage? And I say, it makes it much more serious to begin with. So I asked them not to do it. And they said, no, it's going to work, it's going to work. And I didn't think it would. And I didn't see it, but I hear it didn't. But yeah, okay. The man at the microphone who we can't see. Oh, there's no one there, I'm sorry.
You mentioned Chekhov a few minutes ago, and one of my favorite plays of yours is The Good Doctor. And I wondered, was it difficult, or what was the process of adapting Chekhov's work for you? Was it simple, or?
Well, it was with reverence. I mean, you really have to be careful. But I didn't adapt any of his, as far as I know, any of his plays. I only adapted his short stories and articles that he wrote in newspapers. And I wrote it just to keep myself busy, because it was the last summer of my wife Joan's life. And I just wanted to keep busy for her to see that everything was going along normally. So it was a joyous thing for me to write about. It took a lot of pressure off me. I didn't even know if it was going to be done or not. Where I ran into trouble is that I ran out of enough good Chekhov stories to write. So I wrote one of my own and passed it off as his. And they liked it. So I didn't get a letter from Chekhov, so I don't know how he feels about it.
What drew you to plays and not some other form of writing, such as novels or short stories?
It's hard to say. I remember my parents taking me to the theater when I was about 14 or 15 years old. And at that time, New York theater was very different, because when they said it went on the road, sometimes the play would close on Broadway, and then it would tour the boroughs. It would go to the Bronx. It did. Went to the Bronx, went to the Brooklyn, Queens. It didn't go to Staten Island because they didn't know how to get there. So, but the first play I saw was a play that was on Broadway. It was, I can't think of his name now. Why am I getting stuck on this? Pardon me? You're not going to guess. How are you going to guess what my play? There's a million plays for you to choose from, and you're going to guess. I remember the actor. If there's anyone here who would know that, his name was Canada Lee. Yes, okay, he's a black actor. Native son. Okay, thank you. See, why didn't you get that? But I sat there. I was enthralled. I was sitting like 10 rows back or something, and I'm saying, there's real actors on the stage, and they keep doing this all night long, and it was incredible. And I thought, maybe one day I would love to do something like this, because I would, even as a kid, I was going home at night or after school and writing in my notebooks just little short stories or anecdotes of things. I was inching up towards writing. Any voices from the dark?
Your name was once associated with the Gershwin Project. Whatever became of that?
Yeah. I wanted to write a musical, and I asked through an intermediary if I could speak to the Gershwin estate. It's hard to talk to an estate. You have to talk to a person there. So I actually got to speak to Mrs. Gershwin, because Ira Gershwin had passed on too. But the people who had the properties said, we would love you to. And they said, what do you want to do? And I said, could I hear all of the songs? And so I was in California, and I went to Ira Gershwin's house, and George Gershwin's piano was in the living room, and these two men played 250 songs over about an 8-day period. And I picked out the 60 songs that I liked best, then whittled them down to 40, then down to about 25. And then, again, I was too reverential with them. Instead of me trying to make the book work, I was trying to lead into the songs as best I could so that the songs would really show themselves well. So the book didn't turn out well, I don't think, but I had a reading of it in front of my friends. About 30 people came, and I got a few actors to read it, and they were the wrong actors, and I got 2 people to sing all the songs, which didn't make much sense because some were older, some were younger. And they all started to criticize the thing, and I said, what are you criticizing? It's just the first time I'm hearing it. But I just got nervous about it, and I didn't want to embarrass the Gershwin estate by coming up with something bad. So I dropped it. It was a good title, though, A Foggy Day, because I love that song. And it took place in London. Yes?
When I read Rewrites, one of the things I was so impressed with was the fact that you're so non-proprietary about your own material. You see it, and you're able to see its flaws and rewrite it. And I teach young teenagers theater, and I find it very difficult for them to get past that particular point, whether it be a performance or playwriting or directing. It's very hard for them not to take it personally. How did you get to that point?
About not being proprietary? Well, because it's such a malleable thing, a play, that I'm open to everything. You'd be stupid to not listen. I mean, you listen, and the things that you don't like, you just reject. But I have to hear what everybody's opinion is. I have very strong opinions about my work and about the actors I pick and directors. But if you don't leave yourself open, then you close yourself off. And that's not where I want to be. So many people have helped me so much. When we were doing the movie of Biloxi Blues, we were doing the scene with Christopher Walken and Matthew Broderick. And it was in one of the barracks rooms, and it was a violent scene almost. He wasn't hitting him, but he was threatening him with his life. And Christopher Walken did the scene, but he didn't say one line that I wrote. But I thought it was incredible. And I said, Chris, don't change what you just did. Don't say my words, say yours, they're better. And he said, no. He said, I had to do that so I understood it, so I say it in my words, but your words are better, trust me. So I was sorry that he went back to my words, but he turned out to be terrific in it. But yeah, you just have to be. And I don't know how you translate that to your kids, but because I think they're too young to not be proprietary. Yes?
Have you done much play doctoring? I think you have a nickname, don't you? They call it
Yes, Doc, but it's not because I did that. I was a famous doctor in Europe once. Well, there's a couple of plays. You read about it with what's the show? Chorus Line. Michael Bennett, the choreographer and the creator of that show, asked me and Marsha Mason to come down to see a preview of Chorus Line, and I saw it and I thought it was incredible. I knew it was going to be a huge hit. And so he took me aside and he says, it needs more humor. And I said, I don't think so. He says, I know it does, and I want you to do it for me. And so I said, well, I can't, you have to get permission from the other writers. He said, no, they said yes. I knew he hadn't even asked them yet. I said, you can't do that. There's the Dramatists Guild, and we have to, abide by the rules. And so then he called me the next day. He says, they said yes, they just didn't want your name on it. So I said, that's fine with me. And it was something like from the grand old tradition, it seemed to me, when Morse Hart and George S. Kaufman and people of that era went out of town to help other people's plays. But I, like an idiot, didn't ask for anything. So if I got like 1/8 of a quarter of a percent, it would have been $1 million or something. But I just did it. And Michael, for whatever reasons, took my pages and he brought it into rehearsal, and he got up and he put it like in there. And so he said, Helen, why don't you say, yeah. I met my father in Buffalo, and I got a big laugh from them. And he says, then you say, and he would do it again. They said, Michael, you're very funny today. He says, well, you know, you get days like that. So I never received anything from him, but he did send me a pair of satin pillowcases. Why? I have no idea. I have no idea.
I'm getting the signal. Oh, one more question? Okay, one more question.
Oh, sorry. Right.
You couldn't see these two Irish people in this Jewish home.
Right.
And at the end of the play, you offered to anybody in the audience, to come up to invest in the play.
I didn't. The producer did.
The producer did, but we didn't have any money, and we didn't like the Irish actors playing the Jewish parts.
Yeah.
But I heard that anybody that did come up was then able to always get first crack at investing in your plays. Is that true?
No, in those days, yes. I mean, we were taking... I mean, I didn't know I was going to turn out to be good. So, we were taking $5 and $10 donations then. It was, because it cost $75,000 to do it. But it took me about 4 or 5 plays to realize that maybe I was a good investment, so I started to invest in my own plays. But no, like the new play, we have enough people who want to invest in it, so. But I'll call you if we need money.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. It was really terrific. Thanks.
Thanks for listening. For more information on the 92nd Street Y, New York, and all of our programs, please visit us at 92ny.org.